just to introduce a little bit more about myself, as I said, I'm Sarah, and as you might be able to tell, I am not originally from the UK. I'm originally from Chicago in the US, where I completed both my undergraduate and graduate degree before moving to the UK. And I've been living here for the past 7 years now and working at Fulbright for the past 5 years. And so I'm delighted to be here this evening presenting this webinar. And this webinar will focus on undergraduate study in the US, and we'll take you through the whole process of how to choose universities, how funding works, and how to apply to US universities. And then at the end, we'll take some questions from you in the Q&A box. I do ask that you leave any questions that you have until the end, just because it's very likely that I might answer your question as we go along. And so I'll let you know at the end when to put those questions into the Q&A box. But as I said, if you're having any kind of technical difficulties and you need to kind of let me know sooner, then go ahead and throw that in there. And just to tell you a little bit more about who we are, so I work at the US-UK Fulbright Commission, and we were actually established more than 70 years ago in the aftermath of World War II by a man named Senator Fulbright, who himself had studied in the UK as a Rhodes Scholar. And he thought that the best way to avoid a third world war would be to encourage cultural and educational exchange. So the Fulbright Commission was born for that. It's a jointly funded or a non-for-profit organization, jointly funded by the US and UK government to promote peace and cultural understanding through educational exchange. And we do that in a number of different ways at Fulbright. So one way that we do that is through scholarships, awards at the postgraduate level for students to go to the US and come to the UK from the US and study at the postgraduate level and to receive awards for that. We also have our Education USA services, which is where I come in. And the Education USA, what we aim to do is to provide free, non-biased, up-to-date advice for anybody in the UK who is interested in going to the US. And we are actually one of more than 400 advising centers around the world. And so we have similar centers all over the world. So I'm here specifically to help UK students who are interested in going to the US. So I hope that I'm able to do some of that for you this evening. And I always like to start out a little bit with why students choose to go to the US, because there are usually around 10, 11,000 students that go from the UK to the US each year to study. And there's a variety of different reasons that they do that. And one of the reasons that you may be familiar with is just the reputation and the variety of US universities. So there's over 4,000 institutions in the US that offer an undergraduate degree compared to about 120 here in the UK. And so with that many different universities to choose from, there's just a lot of options, a lot of choice. They have different specialties sometimes. And so it just provides a lot of choice that doesn't exist in the same way when you don't have as many to choose from. Also, if you are looking for kind of a top institution, if you're talking about the top 1% of institutions, of 4,000 institutions, you're talking about 40 institutions. I'm guessing you can't name 40 US universities off the top of your head that would be in the top 1% of institutions in the US. And so that's another reason that students choose to go to the US. Also, this aspect of campus life. So in the US, it's not just about educating you in the classroom, but also educating you outside of the classroom as well and educating you as a person. And so that means that there are a wide variety of extracurricular activities that are available. And there's lots of different ways to get involved. It could be something as simple as cheering on the American football team at the university, but there's also more of the traditional ones like working on the school newspaper, joining the student government, being in the band, playing some intramural sports. And then, as I said, there's all sorts of variety. And so there might be all sorts of kind of random clubs that you could be a part of. So for instance, when I was at university, I was part of the Harry Potter fan club. And I was, I may be aging myself a bit here, but I was still at university when the books and the movies were coming out. And so we would kind of like read them together and do things related to that. And I'm sure that there are much more culturally relevant and age relevant clubs that are happening now for your age group as well. Also, one of the top reasons that we hear students from the UK being interested in going to the US is the academic flexibility that it offers. So what we have in the US is something called the liberal arts curriculum. And what that means is that you get to spend the first 2 years of university studying classes in a variety of different subjects before you decide what you want to specialize or major in. This means that you can apply to university undecided about what you want to study. And that's a huge appeal for a lot of UK students who maybe don't know yet what they want to study, or who really struggle to kind of narrow down their choices from GCSEs to A levels. And they're like, I really like that I can still take classes in all these subjects. That being said, if you already know what you want to study, that's absolutely okay too. There are plenty of US students who go to university knowing what they want to study. It just means that you can start taking classes in that and also take classes in other things as well. So for instance, I worked with a student here in the UK who was really passionate about computer science and went to university in the US to study computer science, but he also had this passion for philosophy. And because he was in the US, he was able to take philosophy classes alongside those computer science classes. So as you can imagine, this is something that is a big selling point for US universities to UK students. Also, this one might be surprising for some of you, but the number of funding opportunities is another top reason. While, as we'll discuss in much more detail later on in this webinar, US universities can be expensive and more expensive than UK universities. There is a ton of funding that is available if you are willing to do your research and find it. And so for some students end up going to the US for less money than if they stayed in the UK. And then also employment. So as you might imagine, studying in another country, taking classes in another country, maybe working on campus, doing internships in another country is a great way to boost your CV. Upon returning to the UK, you'll be able to talk about this experience you have. It shows that you are willing to step outside your comfort zone, willing to learn about other cultures. You may have developed intercultural communication skills. There's a lot of aspects about doing a degree in the US and doing a degree abroad that can be really beneficial to your CV. And lastly, this last one on here is the opportunity to explore US culture. The US is a huge country. It spans lots of different time zones, and being on campus at a US university really gives you the opportunity to immerse yourself in that culture. There's also long summer breaks. There's long breaks where you might be able to travel or perhaps do internships in other parts of the country. And so being able to explore the culture and learn more about it is another top reason for studying in the US. So now that I've talked about some of those reasons why students choose to go to the US, I also just like to highlight some of the key differences between a degree in the US and here in the UK. So first, as many of you might already know, the duration. So a typical undergraduate degree in the US is about 4 years compared to a typical 3 years here in the UK. In the US, you will typically apply to the university as a whole rather than a department. Again, that's going along with that liberal arts curriculum that I talked about. You might be undecided about what you want to study. And so having the opportunity to apply to the university rather than a particular department. There's also no set fees or deadlines. And so while many universities may follow kind of similar deadlines, it might still vary. And so you'll just want to be very sure that when you're applying to universities that you are keeping track of all of those different deadlines and doing research on what the different fees are. Another thing to keep in mind is that if funding is important for you to go to the US, this is something that you're going to want to be thinking about from the beginning of the process and not waiting until after you're admitted. And so we will talk about this a lot in this webinar. And so if you are interested in applying for funding, it's really great that you are here this evening to learn more about it so that you can understand what to do and what not to do in the process. And then another thing that's important to note is that law and medicine are only studied at the postgraduate level in the US. And so you're not able to study those subjects at the undergraduate level. And then just some terminology, which you may have already heard me using. So just to kind of clear up any confusion. High school in the US refers to grades 9 and 12, and that corresponds to secondary school for years 10 through 13 in England and Wales, years 11 to 14 in Northern Ireland, and S3 through S6 in Scotland. In the UK, you say university, but you might hear me refer to college, university, school, institution, and I will mean university for all of those things. What you call a module in the UK, we typically refer to as a class or a course. And then what you call a course, we would refer to as a major or a degree program. So just some terminology that you'll hear me talking about and that you might see coming up when you're doing your research on US universities. And then to briefly go through a timeline of what you can expect and how to kind of plan your time in terms of applying to US universities. So we typically recommend beginning to research universities about 1 to 1.5 years before enrollment. And so if you are in year 12 at the moment, now is probably a really good time for you to be attending this webinar. It's giving you lots of time to do everything that you need. And then you'll be looking to see if any of the institutions where you're applying are going to require any admissions exams, and we'll talk more about this later on. And if they do require any admissions exams, you'll want to be taking these in kind of the spring, summertime before your final year of school. You can technically take them in the autumn as well, but typically that summer is kind of the best time to be doing it. And then in the early autumn of your final year of school, you'll be kind of finalizing that selection of 6 to 10 schools where ultimately you're going to apply. And I guess I should say some people might be applying while they're on a gap year. So finalizing the selection of 6 to 10 schools in the year before you hope to enroll is another way of saying that. And then you'll be putting together an application and submitting in kind of the fall, late autumn period, depending on where it is that you're applying. You'll typically receive any admissions decisions by the spring and make any decisions about where you want to attend by typically around May 1st. And then you would go ahead and apply for your visa at that point, usually about 2 to 3 months before enrollment. And then you'll be able to use our resources and information on our website for all sorts of pre-departure information. And then in the summer, you will begin at the end of the summer, beginning of autumn, you'll begin your studies. So kind of mid to late August, early September. So it is a bit earlier than you would begin studying in the UK. So now I want to talk about choosing a university, which is a really important step in the process of applying to a US university. And the key part of this is to be flexible. As I said, there's over 4,500 universities in the US, and so it can be a bit daunting of a process to narrow down your different options, but we're going to discuss some strategies that you can use to do this. And just some important notes about that before I go into that is, as I said, there's a variety and a diversity of different institutions. So there are, for instance, a lot of big research universities, which are kind of more akin to what a lot of the universities here are in the UK, that have undergraduate students and postgraduate students and lots of different programs. But there are also smaller institutions. There's something in the US called liberal arts colleges, which offer usually much smaller numbers of students, maybe a few thousand or something like that. And they only have undergraduate students and they don't have any postgrad students on campus. And they kind of really focus on that liberal arts education and really providing a well-rounded education. We have women's colleges, which are specifically for women students. And then some very famous women have gone to some of those institutions. So there are a lot of different institutions that are available and things that are quite different from the UK. So we have on our website lots of information about all of these different types. So it'd be good to kind of do some research and see what types of things are available. And then, as I already mentioned and will continue to mention, you'll want to make sure that you're considering funding. And the reason for this is that if funding is important for you to go to the US, then not all universities in the US offer funding to international students. And so you'll want to make sure that if you need funding, that you're only spending time applying to institutions that can offer you the funding that you would need to attend, because there's no point in applying to a university that is willing to accept you but not give you any money to go. And then also, we always recommend having a backup plan here in the UK, continuing to apply for university through UCAS, just so that if things don't go the way that you would like in your US university applications, that you still have a backup plan here. And something to remember here is that you can always apply to UK universities that give you the option to do a year abroad in the US, if that's something that you're interested in. And so the first thing that you really want to think about when choosing a US university is determine your fit. And this is a word that you hear us using a lot here at Education USA and at the Fulbright Commission. And basically what that means is to think through different factors that are important to you when choosing a university and finding a university that kind of offers those different factors. So for example, you might be thinking of things both inside and outside of the classroom. You might be thinking about the types of programs and departments. If there is something that you know that you want to study, making sure that the institution offers it. You might be thinking, as I said, about whether funding is available. If funding is something that's important to you, only applying to institutions that offer it. You might be thinking about location. If you're somebody that hates the cold, then and the idea of it being snowy and dark in the winter, you might be avoiding the northeastern part of the U.S. Similarly, we have had students that don't want it to be hot all the time. They don't want to be hot year round, so they might be avoiding going to the southern parts of the U.S. So things to think about. You also are going to want to think about what the environment of the university is like. Do you want to be somewhere that's very rigorous, somewhere that maybe has a bit of a competitive environment? Would you rather be somewhere that's very supportive, that's really inclusive, those types of things? So you can start thinking about all of those different factors, and that can help you get an idea of what it is that you're going to be looking for at an institution. Something that, sorry, going way ahead of myself here. Something that is also worth thinking about, that we encourage people to think beyond, is to think beyond the rankings. I know rankings hold a lot of weight here in the UK, but rankings don't quite work in the same way in the US. The way that they're determined is not necessarily as accurate. Sometimes they're determined even by like peers at institutions ranking each other, as opposed to any kind of well thought out process. And so it's important to take rankings with a grain of salt. It might be that you use like a rankings list as an idea of how to find some universities that maybe you've never heard of before. Perhaps you know that you really want to study psychology, for instance, and you're looking up the best universities to study psychology. And that ranking list can at least give you that list of institutions that maybe you've never heard of before, since there's so many on offer. And then what you would want to do is then kind of look through those institutions and make sure that those institutions are truly a good fit for you, and that you're not just choosing them based on this ranking list that should be taken with a grain of salt. So once you've thought about all those different factors that are important to you, you can begin narrowing down your options. And unlike UCAS, you're not limited to the number of universities that you apply to in the US, but as I said, because each university typically has its own application and its own essays that you'll have to complete, for kind of time purposes, we recommend applying to about 6 to 10 institutions. Also, each university is going to have an application fee. And so it's also something worth considering, that you'd be paying a fee for each university that you apply to. So they'll kind of be narrowing down your list of institutions by doing some research, narrowing it down to about maybe 10 to 20 that you're going to do intensive research on, and then ultimately applying to about 6 to 10. And on our website, we have lots of resources of different search engines that you can use, and you can actually filter by some of these different options to help you narrow it down. And I'm going to take you through an example of that now. So this is one of the search engines that's linked on our website. It's called the Big Future College Search. And you can see here that there's a variety of different filters that you can use. including location, major, type, campus life. And then even within this, there's an affordability section where you can choose institutions meeting 100% of financial need and meeting financial aid for international students to kind of narrow it down even further. So you can see in this example here that we've put in a variety of filters to narrow down our list of schools. So here I've selected that you want to attend a four-year school with fewer than 9,000 students in Ohio. And I've only selected institutions that will meet 100% of financial need. So that brought down, there's about maybe 3,600 institutions in this college search tool, and it brought it down from 3,600 down to 4. So that's a much more manageable number to work with, for instance. So you can see how by thinking through some of those factors and using these different search engines, you can kind of start narrowing it down. And then from here, you can click through on, let's say, Denison University, and it'll provide you with more information on their university profile, with information like application deadlines, a link to their website, that kind of thing. And it's important to note you will want to double check all of this information on the university websites. Sometimes these search engines might not have it 100% accurately. And so you'll want to make sure that you're kind of going to the institution websites and checking that information just to be certain. All right. So once you narrow down your options, you'll research them further on the university website and selecting that kind of 6 to 10 institutions where you'll actually submit an application. And we typically suggest having kind of a range of institutions, probably similar to what you would do with your UCAS applications. You might have a couple of kind of reach institutions where their average academic profile might be a bit higher than what your grades are, or maybe it's one that you'd be thrilled to get into, but it's just ultra competitive, even if you do have the academic profile to be accepted there. Then you'll want to apply to maybe 3 to 4 what we call match schools, where your profile is kind of roughly on par with their average applicant. And then maybe about 2 likely admittance schools. So similar to like a UCAS insurance choice, where your application would be really competitive to their average admitted students. And you'll be able to kind of look on university websites. Sometimes they offer kind of a profile of the average admitted applicant to kind of get a sense of how you compare. On the university website, you'll also be able to find information about specific programs, campus virtual tours, student life, sports, student housing, financial aid, all of that kind of thing. You can also see what types of resources they have for international students. And then you can also check out social media channels to get more of a feel for the college and the university personality, and also just what they're focused on. And so now I'll just take you through 3 different universities that there are in the US, just to get a sense of how there's different institutions that are on offer and different things that you might be thinking about. So this is Middlebury College. And this is, if you're looking for a competitive school, but one that's also small, collaborative, and offers a lot of research opportunities, you might want to consider a liberal arts college like Middlebury College, which is located in Middlebury, Vermont, which is known to be a liberal and artsy area of the US and known for its beautiful waterfalls and hiking opportunities. Or if you're a female student who loves palm trees and sunshine, you might consider Scripps College, a women's college in Claremont, California. Or if you want to experience some Southern hospitality and warm weather and country music, you might look at Vanderbilt University, a private research university in Nashville, Tennessee. So these are just 3 out of the thousands and thousands of universities that are on offer, but just to highlight 3 institutions that perhaps maybe you've never heard of before, but that are very well known in the US for many different reasons, and to get you thinking about some of the different options that are on offer. And just here a note on the Ivy League. So the Ivy League is historically a sports league between the 8 oldest universities in New England. So it's not equivalent to the Russell Group, which is a common misconception. You can't join the Ivy League. So you can't the way that you can with the Russell Group. So for instance, there's many other well-known institutions, think MIT, think Stanford, that will never be in the Ivy League because they were not part of this historic sports league back when the universities first started. Something to note about these universities, yes, they are very well-known universities. They do offer very strong academics, strong programs. They are all private research universities, which means that if you only apply to these institutions, you'd be limiting your opportunities to explore other institutions, such as liberal arts colleges, such as women's colleges, or specialist institutions. And I've said a little bit about liberal arts colleges already, but just to kind of note, they're also extremely competitive. They offer a lot of undergrad research opportunities, but they'll never be the Ivy League, and they're not as well known in the UK, despite that they are top quality schools. The other thing just to keep in mind with the Ivy League is that they're all extremely competitive. And so if you're only applying to these institutions, then you're really narrowing your chances of acceptance. So it might be that if you are interested in these institutions, that you're applying to a couple of them, but also doing some research and applying to some other institutions as well, just so that you are widening your chance of acceptance. So now that we've talked about choosing, I'm going to move on to talking about funding your studies, which, as you might imagine, is one of the top things that we get asked about here at Education USA and at Fulbright. So in this section, we want to be both upfront about the costs that are involved to study in the US, but also to dispel some myths related to funding US studies. And one thing to note here before we get started is that finding funding for university is a challenge for both US and international students. And so to help you meet this challenge, we're going to run through the costs that you can anticipate, different sources of funding that you can pull from, and strategies that you can implement to find funding. So first, I'll just run through some of the costs that you can expect throughout the whole process. So before even attending a US university, there are going to be expenses involved in the application process. If you need to sit any admissions exams for the institutions where you're applying, then those exams typically cost between $100 to $200 each. There'll also be application fees for each institution that you apply to, although depending on your family circumstances, it might be that you might be able to have those application fees waived, depending on the institutions that you apply to. And then if you are accepted at a US university, you will have one-time visa and SEVIS fees. SEVIS is just it's like the international student database that the Department of Homeland Security uses. And so there's a fee to kind of register yourself on that, which is just a required part of the visa process. Then you'll have the actual tuition and fees of the institution itself. So there are no set fees in the US the way that there are here in the UK. And so the fees really can vary quite significantly depending on the institution where you're going. But one of the things to keep in mind if you're looking at a US university website is that they do, I think they're required actually to list all of the costs on their website. And so they will include tuition as well as the room and board at the university. And so if you're looking at a cost of attendance price on the website, it's going to usually include things like tuition and room and board. And it might even include things like books. Some include like the cost of a laptop and some of those. So just that's worth keeping in mind. And then some other things to think about is just general costs of living and other expenses. So things like health insurance, things like eating out when not on campus, any kind of entertainment expenses, going out with friends are just all different types of costs that you might want to think about. The good news is that there are a variety of funding opportunities available, and it is possible to have an affordable US university education. And many students are able to fully fund their studies without loans. The key is being willing to kind of put in the time and the effort to seek out and apply for that funding. So with that in mind, these are kind of the main sources of funding a US education. And so the money comes from a variety of different places. And in the US, one of the first places that this money comes from is from personal and family funds. because university is so expensive in the US, and because it kind of has been for a very long time, a lot of families do save for their children to go to university and do make a contribution to university expenses. And there is an expectation in the US that what a family can afford to pay, they will pay. And for any students who are applying for any kind of need-based financial aid, the university is going to look at a family's income, and they are going to determine what that family can afford to pay. And it's based on what the family can afford to pay as opposed to what the family is willing to pay, if you understand. And so that's kind of one of the main sources of funding. That being said, there is also a lot of funding that's available from US universities themselves, both in the form of need-based aid and also in the form of merit-based scholarships, which we'll talk about in more detail on the next slide. There's also funding available from external funding bodies, which we'll talk about in more detail in a little bit. And then as a last resort, there are loans. Now, you're not able to take your UK student loan with you to study in the US. And unless you are a US citizen or have US residency or a permanent residency, or somebody in the US that could co-sign a US loan, you're not able to take out any loans in the US. And so if you were considering loans as an option, you'd have to take out private UK loans. But we don't typically recommend this, and would say that you would only do this in a very last resort, because those types of private loans typically have very high interest rates, very strict payback terms that might require you to start paying back the loan before you've even completed your studies, before you're even earning. And so it's really is a last resort. And if that is something that you're considering, you'll just kind of want to make sure that you're looking at all of those terms and conditions very closely before taking on anything like that. So to talk in more detail about university funding, this is really an ideal form of funding because it doesn't have to be paid back. And there's two main types of funding, as I mentioned before, both need-based aid and merit-based scholarships. Now, need-based aid is based on a family's income level, based on financial need. And what that means is that a university looks at how much a family can afford to pay, and they assess that amount, and then they try to make up the rest of that amount. So let's say that a university costs $50,000 US per year, and they look at the family's income, and the family can afford to pay $10,000 US per year. So there's now $40,000 left to pay. So a university that agrees to meet full need would say that we will pay that other $40,000. So universities that meet full need will pay whatever the family can't afford to pay. So you can forward the $10,000, we'll pay the $40,000. Now, not all universities in the US offer this type of aid. So it's going to be really important that if that's the type of aid that you're applying for, that you're making sure that you only apply to universities that offer that type of aid, and that they offer that aid to international students. And there are some universities that offer to meet some of that, but they won't offer to meet 100%. So they might say, for instance, that you can pay $10,000, so you've got $40,000 left to pay, and we'll give you $20,000 of that, which means that you're still, in addition to the $10,000 that you're paying each year, still going to have another $20,000 each year that you're going to have to figure out how to pay. So if this is the type of aid that you're looking for, you'll want to make sure that you're only applying to universities that meet full need. And in that example that I showed you earlier of the search engine, when you're searching universities, you can actually filter for universities that are looking for that. Keeping in mind that if that is the type of aid that you're looking for, and you're looking for significant amounts of that aid, it is going to be very competitive. So just being aware that it does exist, it is just very competitive to compete for and obtain that type of financial aid. There's also merit-based scholarships from a university. So this is based on something like academic merit, such as maybe your A-level predictions, or maybe your admissions test scores, or some type of niche criteria, like maybe you play musical instruments and you get a music scholarship. Or there's also sports scholarships, which is a form of merit-based scholarships. And we have more information about sports scholarships available on our website if you want to learn about that. So as I've said, as you start to investigate funding, you'll want to look for information about whether the university makes scholarships available to international students, because not all do. Oops. Yeah, okay. This is the next page. So next we'll talk about external funding bodies. So funding bodies include a wide range of professional, charitable, or government organizations external to the university. And these can be thought of as niche scholarships, as they have specific criteria based on the mission of the funding body. So for instance, it might be based on a particular country of origin, an ethnicity, a religious faith, maybe an interest in a particular field, a gender, interests, talents, so all sorts of things. So for example, there might be scholarships specifically for women engineers. If you are unique in any way, there's likely a funding body with a scholarship out there for you. You just have to find it. And these scholarships can vary. It might be that they are kind of small one-time awards where it might be providing kind of small amounts of money towards your education. But there are also scholarships that might provide kind of fully funded experiences. So one example of that is what's called the Moorhead-Cain Scholarship. And the Moorhead-Cain Scholarship provides a 4-year fully funded educational experience for students of the highest caliber at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And for the scholarship, they're looking for students who demonstrate leadership, character, scholarship, and physical vigor. And so in addition to fully funding your studies, and so that means your tuition, your room and board, the Moorhead-Cain Scholarship also offers fully funded summers, summer opportunities. And so that's just an example of one fully funded external funding body. But there are thousands of different funding bodies. So searching does require time and dedication to kind of sift through the scholarship listings and to submit separate applications to each body. So for this reason, we do typically encourage students to first apply for university funding opportunities and then for external funding. And we do also have links on our website to different search engines for scholarships. So there are a few different approaches to a funding strategy, which is something that you might consider in terms of funding your studies in the US. One thing that you might consider is exploring universities in places with a lower cost of living. Just like in the UK, London is going to be more expensive than Lancaster. Living in New York or California in the US is going to be more expensive than living in states like Ohio or Georgia. As I mentioned earlier, American universities list on their website the full estimated cost of attendance, and that includes the cost of living and personal expenses. So you can start scoping out places with lower costs of living. You might also just look at programs with lower tuition. So for instance, in the US, we have state universities which receive money from the state. And so they tend to typically have tuition at a lower cost than other universities. And then as we've discussed, you may also consider applying for funding using the different funding opportunities that are available. I also want to mention community college, because this is an increasingly popular choice in the US as an alternative pathway that helps save a lot of money. So community colleges generally award something called an associate's degree, which is not a degree that's offered here in the UK. It's a degree that often has a professional and vocational focus and is typically earned in about 2 years. And what people typically do who then want to get their bachelor's degree is they do what's called the 2+2 transfer pathway. So they start their studies at a community college, complete the 2 years, earn their associates, and then they transfer to a 4-year university, receiving their bachelor's degree from that university in another 2 years. So 2 years at the community college, 2 years at a 4-year institution, ending up with a bachelor degree. A lot of community colleges have transfer agreements with nearby universities. So for example, you see here on the screen that Los Angeles Valley College is a 2-year community college that has a partnership with universities like UCLA, University of Southern California, and Cal Poly. Some of the benefits of a community college is that it's much less expensive than 4-year universities. typically the tuition cost is just significantly cheaper. And so you can save thousands by paying for that lower tuition cost of a community college. Also, they have smaller class sizes, which can be really valuable for introductory classes. You get more contact with professors, and they generally involve less rigorous application processes and entry requirements than a four-year university. And this can be particularly good for students with BTech or OCR or other similar qualifications. And most community colleges are not going to require an admissions exam score for admission. And in terms of personal experience with this, my husband actually attended community college and earned his associates before transferring to the university where I was attending and completing his bachelor's degree. And he really did save tens of thousands of dollars in doing this. So whereas a lot of my friends at my four-year institution had tons of student loans that they had taken out over the cost of their 4 years, my husband only had to take out loans for his final 2 years of college, and he just saved a lot of money in doing that. So just some final funding tips to wrap up this section about funding. So since applying for funding is simultaneous to the admissions process, you want to begin your search for funding early. It does take time to research funding at the schools where you want to apply to, and it also takes time to apply for those external scholarships. As I mentioned before, you'll want to make sure that you are looking at specific university websites for information about funding and using the online scholarship searches. As I said, there's a list available on our website. You might want to think about having a funding strategy in terms of fully funding your studies. You might need a combination of the different types of funding that we've discussed: family funds, university funds, external funding bodies. And so you'll want to investigate each type of funding. And it'll be really important to remain flexible in choosing universities. Don't just apply where thousands of other British students apply, and don't apply to universities where you know that you're not going to be competitive. Give yourself the best chance of being a standout applicant at the universities where you're going to apply. So now that we've talked about choosing a university and funding your studies, we'll talk about completing an application to a US university. So what are US universities looking for? And first and foremost, they're going to be looking at your academics. So that will be measured by your results, so your GCSEs and your National Fives, as well as any kind of predicted grades. So any prediction A levels, any predicted hires and advanced hires. And if they do require an admissions test score, they'll also be looking at that admissions test score to kind of determine that academic piece. Oftentimes, you might be able to check on a website to see if they give any kind of average applicant profile to see how you might compare. However, academic achievement alone doesn't guarantee entrance to a competitive US university, as it's much more holistic than in the UK. So in addition to the academics, they might also be looking at your academic fit. So what reasons do you have for pursuing a degree at their institution? How is it going to help you with your goals? So for instance, if you are somebody who is looking to study in New York, why are you choosing to apply to NYU instead of Columbia? Or why are you choosing to apply to Columbia instead of NYU? You don't want to just write an essay that's all about, I love New York. I want to be in New York, because a university is going to want to see a particular fit for their institution. And if you're just writing about why you love New York, they're not going to know why you want to be at their university. Is there a particular program? Is there a particular campus activity? Does the institution have a particular mission that you're passionate about? So academic fit is another important component of the application. Also, as I briefly mentioned earlier, extracurriculars are a big focus in the US, and it's a way for universities to understand what you're passionate about outside of the classroom. And so they're going to ask you what it is that you're involved in outside of class. This doesn't mean that you have to be involved in everything in order to get accepted to a US university. It just means including information about what it is that you do. And I mean, that could be, your traditional extracurriculars like a school club or playing a sport, but it could also be something that you might not realize is an extracurricular, like having a part-time job or Maybe you have caring responsibilities for a family member, or you have to help look after siblings while a parent works. So all of these types of things are things that the university is going to want to know about you to help understand what it is that you do when you're outside of the classroom. And they're also going to be looking at your personal attributes throughout the application. So as I said, it's a holistic admissions process, and universities are looking to diversify their campuses and classrooms and not have all of one type of person at their university. They want lots of unique people, lots of unique experiences coming to form their class. And so throughout the application, they might be trying to get a sense of what it is that you're interested in studying, what your character is like, what your leadership abilities are like. All of these different types of things are things that they might be looking at in the application. So what are those different components of the application exactly? So unlike the UK, you will have to apply to each university individually rather than through a centralized body like UCAS. And as I said, you can apply to as many as possible, though for time and cost purposes, we typically recommend applying to about 6 to 10 schools. While we don't have the UCAS system, there is something called the Common Application, which around 900 universities in the US use. And that helps to kind of streamline at least like the demographic information of your name and email address and some of that kind of basic information about you. It's not exactly like UCAS in that you'll still have to tailor all of your applications to each university. They might have like slightly different questions that each university asks, maybe different supplemental essays that they'll require, but at least it helps streamline some of that information. And as I mentioned earlier, there's no standard process for applications, and deadlines and requirements are going to vary by university. That being said, many applications will follow a similar format, and so you are typically able to reuse or adapt the materials that you prepare for each. So most are going to include that application form that has that basic demographic information about you. You'll want to check to see if an admissions exam score is even required at the institutions where you're interested in applying, and if so, they might require an exam score. They're going to require a transcript, which is something that your school will provide, and I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment. They'll also typically require 2 to 3 essays, also some recommendation letters from teachers at your school. And lastly, as I've mentioned, an application fee. So depending on your family circumstances, it might be that you're able to have this application fee waived. So to go into all of those components in a little bit more detail, first we have our admissions exams. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is see if they're even required. I know over COVID this past couple of years, many universities stopped requiring them. And some universities decided that they don't need them anymore. And so they're not going to require them going forward. Other universities required them all the way through, and other universities said, okay, well, now we're at a point where we feel like we can start requiring them again, and they will. So this is something to research to see if it's even needed. Also, if you're somebody who doesn't really like the idea of taking an admissions exam, it could be that you decide to only apply to universities that don't require them. So just something to think about. The reason that they exist in the first place is because there's no national curriculum at the secondary school level in the US. So it's a way to evaluate applicants from diverse areas in schools. And so they created it for this purpose. And as I said, they're typically completed kind of in the spring or the summer before your final year of school, but they can also be taken in that autumn of your final year of school as well. Universities are going to, if they do require it, it's going to be either the ACT or the SAT. So you can decide which one it is that you want to take. But with that in mind, what I would suggest in terms of choosing between the ACT and SAT is going online, going to their websites and taking a free practice test under timed conditions for each one and seeing which one you did better on. In my own personal experience, I can say that I did significantly better on one of the exams than the other. And I'm obviously like the same person and I know the same information. It's just that the way that the test was set up, I just tended to do better on one of the exams than the other. So I would suggest that you go online, take a free practice test under time condition, see which one you do better on, and then that's the one that you should revise for. That being said, let's say you take them both and they're about the same. You can just choose which one you prefer. Some other things to keep in mind is that the ACT is a computer-based test. And so it tends to be offered more frequently and in more locations than the SAT, which isn't necessarily offered as frequently. But I think, and you'll have to double check on the websites to see this for sure, the ACT does tend to cost more than the SAT. So different things to weigh, to think about, especially depending on where you're traveling from. It may, even though the ACT might cost more to take, if there's one closer to you, if there's a testing center closer to you, you might be saving on transport costs. So just different things to think about. And in terms of what's on those exams, so they are multiple choice exams, and they typically test in the areas of math, English and reading, that type of thing. And there are tons of free resources available online to prepare for these exams. So you're able to make use of lots of those resources. There are also books that you can buy to study. If you really wanted to, there are kind of tutors available to help you with that, though that can be at quite a significant cost. And so if cost is an issue, then I do encourage you to make use of a lot of the free resources that are online or buying a book, which is slightly more affordable. So just some things to think about. Transcripts. So as I said, this is a document that your school will provide for you to your US university applications. And basically what the school will do is include a list of your academic qualifications. So those exam results at GCSE or National 5, as well as any kind of predicted grades at A-level, higher, advanced higher. And they'll probably also include a note of where they're getting these predicted grades from, whether it's made up of coursework or mock exams, and kind of including some information about that. And also just the years that you attended the school. We do have templates for this available on our website. So we have a whole tab that's like resources for UK schools. So if your school has never supported a student with applying to the US before, send them to our website, send them to our resources. And they can use that to kind of help create these documents. They may also create a school report, which is just providing information about your school, where your school is located, that kind of stuff. You'll also be required to submit typically about 2 to 3 recommendation letters. And these are used as a marketing tool for you as an applicant. And so, though your referees might have particular areas that they can speak to, you might direct your referees to write about maybe your ability to succeed at university, maybe your past academic performance, observations about your performance in class or on assignments, school awards, writing and critical thinking skills, work experience, maybe your ability to positively contribute to a university and to campus life, maybe your leadership abilities and character, maybe about your involvement in the school and community. So there's lots of things that they can write about. You'll want to make sure that you ask somebody who knows you well, both in and out of the classroom, to write these references. And it's really important that you encourage your referees to write enthusiastically. As you might imagine, their American counterparts are writing about their students in very enthusiastic tones, using very enthusiastic language. So there's no room for modesty in these letters. So make sure that they're not being modest, that they are really selling you as an applicant when they are writing these letters. It's probably a good idea for you to meet with them beforehand and talk with them in advance to let them know this, maybe talk to them about why it is that you're applying to the different institutions, what it is that they should include. Sometimes a university will say who they want these letters to come from. So they might require that one letter come from a counselor and one come from a teacher. A counselor doesn't really exist the same in the UK school system as it does in the US. So typically for UK students, for your counselor, we would recommend choosing somebody like maybe a head of sixth form or a head of year, or maybe a form tutor, or like a head of careers, somebody like that to kind of write that counselor recommendation, because they're going to be writing a recommendation letter about you as a student within the school community. And then for the teacher recommendation letters, we would typically recommend choosing somebody who has taught you in your final 2 years of school. So kind of at that A level, at the level of A levels or hires or advanced hires, so that they can write about you as a student in the classroom and how you contribute to the classroom. All right, and lastly, when it comes to the application, talking about essays. So this is one of the most important parts of the application process for undergraduate study in the US, especially if you're applying to a highly competitive institution where all of the applicants have excellent grades, excellent exam scores, excellent extracurriculars. A really strong essay can help set you apart from other students in that application pool and give you an opportunity to kind of showcase yourself to a university. A personal statement or an essay for a US university is very different from a UCAS personal statement. So rather than submitting an explanation of your interests and achievements in a particular field of study like you would with UCAS, you'll be asked to respond to between 1 and 3 essay questions on the US university application. And each university will set its own questions as well as their desired length for your response. However, if you do use that Common App system, there's typically 1 essay question that goes to all universities that you apply to through that system, as well as supplemental questions which are unique to each institution. So just as an example of a couple of those different prompts that might be ones that you'll choose from if you apply to a US university through the Common App. So one example is, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? Or another example, describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So you'll see that it's unlikely that you'll be able to compose one essay that will sufficiently answer all the questions that are posed by multiple universities. However, many students are able to reuse elements of essays for different institutions. With that in mind, we do have some kind of writing tips. So one writing tip is to make sure that you answer the question fully. It seems obvious, but sometimes students, when they're writing their essays, they get so caught up in when they're writing that they forget to kind of revisit that actual question to double check to make sure that they've actually answered the question that's being asked. You'll want to make sure that you're using clear and concise language and avoiding any kind of vague or empty statements or cliches. If you are reusing an essay, as you might imagine, it's really important to submit the correct essay to the correct university and program, and to double check that all references within the text are to the correct university. You'll want to proofread extensively, and you should also ask others to proofread your essays and offer their feedback. But most importantly, be yourself. Don't give the admissions officers the answers that you think they want to hear. Give them the truth. Think about what sets you apart and let your personality come through in the essay. And we do have more tips on our website about writing your essay, as well as links to example essays on university websites. So there's a few universities that actually publish essays of successful applicants who are now attending their university. And you can read through some of those essays to get a sense of what a US university essay might look like. All right, so with that, that is the application process of applying to a US university. And I want to also quickly highlight some other opportunities in the US in case you decide that going to the US for a whole 4-year undergraduate degree isn't for you, or in case it doesn't work out the way that you would like it to in the application process. So there's a few different opportunities. One is to go to the US while at a UK university through a university exchange program. Many UK universities have established exchange programs with US universities or US-based study abroad programs. So for instance, the University of Manchester has partnerships with 18 universities in the US. This can be a logistically simpler way to go to the US because your UK university will help you arrange it. We also have a variety of summer institutes. So on our website, the study of the US Institutes for Student Leaders are intensive short-term academic programs whose purpose is to provide groups of undergraduate student leaders with a deeper understanding of the United States, while simultaneously enhancing their leadership skills. So this is something that you can do while an undergraduate at a UK university, is to do a summer institute in the US. And there's more information about that on our website. Or if you really love America, you could spend your degree studying it. A lot of universities now offer American Studies programs, and they will very often incorporate a year in the US as well. And if you do have any interest in that, we did in the autumn host an American Studies webinar with a number of UK universities. So you can go to our website and kind of type in American Studies webinar, and you'll be able to watch a link to that as well. There's also opportunities to do internships or summer work, maybe as a camp counselor through Camp America or through an organization called UNAC. And also there is always postgraduate study in the US. So as I mentioned earlier, we have Fulbright awards for this. There's also tons of information and advice at the postgraduate level. We lead webinars just like this, except for postgraduate students. So those are just some things to keep in mind. Some other ways that we can help, other than just attending this webinar tonight. So one way that we can help, one of the programs that we offer is the Sutton Trust US program. So the applications for this year's program have actually just closed earlier this week. Some of you attending tonight might have applied for the Sutton Trust US program. But if you haven't applied and you are in year 11 or earlier, then you can look to apply in future years. The program is for very high achieving year 12 students from low income families. And it gives the opportunity to explore US study and visit US universities for a week over the summer before your final year of school. And then you can also apply for continued support to apply to universities in the US in your final year of school. And the program is free for students who are accepted. It's funded by the Sutton Trust, and the program is done in partnership with the Sutton Trust. And so it is a free program for students to take part in. There's more information about that on our website. Speaking of our website is also a really great place to go for advice and guides and information about upcoming events. So under this kind of going to the USA section, we have an undergraduate guide with details on choosing, funding, and applying. So everything that I've talked about tonight, but in much greater detail and also in written form for you to refer back to. So if you haven't found that yet, definitely check that out. We also take questions by email. After I'm done presenting, I can put our email address in the chat box. It's advising@fulbright.org.uk. And so you can send us an email and we can respond to your question by email. And we also offer the opportunity to book a one-to-one video appointment with an advisor. So that's also available on our website on the contact page. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of the contact page, you'll see an option to book a one-to-one video appointment with an advisor to discuss your particular situation in more detail. We also hold a number of events about studying in the US and attend a lot of events about studying in the US. At the moment, it's all been online, but we're hoping that at some point this year that we'll be returning to in-person events. So keep an eye out for that on our website. And if you signed up for our mailing list, when you signed up for this, you'll be notified of any kind of upcoming events as well. And lastly, our USA College Day Fair, typically held at the end of September. It's a free fair where you have the opportunity to meet with representatives from over 120 universities. Excuse me. The past couple of years, it's been held virtually. Fingers crossed, we'll be able to hold it in person. This year, it's typically held at a location, at an event space in London. And it's free to attend, but you do have to register for a ticket in advance. And registration for that typically opens in the late summer. So with that wraps up the kind of presentation part of this webinar. And I'm happy to open it up to questions. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type those in the Q&A box. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, this session has been recorded. And so I will be sending that recording out. So if for any reason you're not able to stay for this Q&A session that's happening now, then you can always head out and check back on the recording. I do ask that you try to keep the questions general, questions that are helpful for the whole group. If you do have any kind of really specific questions that are really unique to your own circumstances, I would suggest that you send us an email or sign up for one of those one-to-one video calls. All right, so I'll just, in the chat here, I'll put our email address. And I can see some questions coming in the chat. So I see a question here about how grades get converted. I'm just going to make sure that I can read it in detail to understand it completely. So it's a question about converting grades to GPA, and basically, we don't recommend converting your grade to a GPA yourself. So you'd put your grades as is, so your GCSE results and your any A-level predictions as is on the application. And the reason for that is because each university typically has their own way of converting it to a GPA. So a GPA is a US grade point average, if you're not familiar with that, and that's what students in the US are awarded at their high schools. And so because it's different for each university, it's best for you just to include your UK results and let the university kind of convert it however they want to. And so, and it really, that will just depend on the university. So, all right. Do you have any tips on finding merit-based academic scholarships for international students looking to study an undergrad degree? And so, as I said, it is going to be a matter of research. It's a really good question. You will just want to use some of those search engines that are available on our website. And a lot of universities will offer merit-based scholarships. Unfortunately, it is a matter of kind of looking at those individual websites to see if they offer them for international students or not. And so, you know, when you're using those search engines, kind of narrowing down what it is that you're interested in and what it is that you're looking for at a university, and looking at those individual websites and having a look at that. So it is a matter of just kind of doing that research, I'm afraid. Somebody has asked what the typical limits are for need-based aid. And so in terms of universities that commit to meeting 100% of demonstrated need, if they're committing to 100% of meeting demonstrated need, then there are no limits. They will look at a family's income level, and they will determine, you know, it's not just income level, it's kind of a variety of different things that they look at to kind of build this picture of a family's finances. And they will determine what the kind of expected contribution can be from that family, what that financial contribution can be. And if it's an institution that guarantees to meet full need, then they will make up the rest of it. So that's why those types of institutions are quite competitive if you are applying for that type of need. And so that's just something to keep in mind. So somebody is a dual US-UK citizen and goes to school in London and has lived here for 9 years. Is it better to apply as a US citizen? So the way that it will work for you is that in terms of like your academic profile and everything, you will be applying as an international student. You know, if you are doing a UK curriculum, so if you're studying for instance, A levels as a curriculum, then your application will be looked at alongside other students from the UK, just because that the person who's reading those applications will have a better understanding of UK education systems. But in terms of financial aid and what you're eligible for with that, you will be considered as a US citizen. So if you are applying, for instance, for any need-based aid, you are eligible for any aid that's available to domestic US students at that point. You're also able to apply for federal loans through something called FAFSA. So you'll be able to apply for financial aid through FAFSA, and the process of applying for aid might just be slightly different. So in terms of financing your education, you will be a domestic US student, but in terms of kind of the academic component of your application, you'll apply as an international student. And if you have any specific questions about that, you can always reach out to the universities where you're planning to apply and kind of explain your circumstances, and they can give you kind of any more specific information. So in terms of a gap year, from what this person has read, it's not supported by many top universities. And can you explain this? So what I will say is that gap years just aren't as common in the US. They just aren't done as frequently as they are done here in the UK. And so typically what we would recommend at Education USA is that if you're planning to do a gap year, that you would apply to US universities during that gap year. And so you would apply to US universities in the year before it is that you plan to enroll, as opposed to applying during your final year of school and then taking a gap year and then going to university. And the reason for this is because gap years aren't as common at US universities. It might be that if you are accepted at a US university and you're in your final year of school, but planning to take a gap year, not all universities will let you kind of defer for that gap year. It might, some might, but they might not. They might ask that you reapply. If you have been awarded any kind of financial aid, they might make you reapply for that financial aid. They might not guarantee it. That being said, it will depend on the university. So if a gap year is something that you know that you want to do and you would prefer to apply while you're still at school as opposed to while you're on your gap year, you can always reach out to institutions and ask. If you are applying to universities while on a gap year, you'll just want to make sure that in your application, you're explaining what it is that you're doing on your gap year. So they'll just want to know how it is, they'll want to know how it is that you're spending your time. And they'll be looking in the same way that they'd be kind of looking at extracurriculars, what it is that you do to spend your time, and thinking about that and to help them understand you as a person and as a person who would make a positive contribution to their university and their campus. Another question, when choosing referees, does this status matter over choosing a head teacher over a normal teacher? Oh, that's a good question. So what's most important really is that you choose somebody who's going to be able to write you a really good letter that works at your school. So if your head teacher happens to know you really well, that's great. But if your head teacher is somebody who doesn't actually know you as well, and you actually have somebody else that knows you really well and could write you a really strong reference, you're going to be better off choosing the person who knows you well and can write that really strong reference. They're going to be looking more at the content of the letter and what it says about you as an applicant, as opposed to who has written it. In terms of who has written it, what they'll be looking for in that is that it's somebody who does know you. So like that they have, they'll want to make sure that whoever's writing it, they've worked with you. So they've either taught you, or they've been a form tutor, or they've led you in some way. And so they will kind of look for that relationship between the student and the person who's writing it. Hope that makes sense. So somebody has asked if there's a threshold or set criteria to establish people from low income. So that's a good question. And so what I would say is, if it's difficult, really. So basically, I think that what you'd really be looking to understand is how much a university might expect somebody to pay. And so what a university does is they have you fill out a really detailed kind of form. Maybe it's oftentimes something called the CSS profile. And they basically look at your family's finances. So like what the income is that's coming in, any benefits that might be coming in. Does the family own any property? Do they pay any mortgages? What is the, what kinds of costs are going out? Rent, food, utilities, transport, clothing, all of those different costs. And they kind of determine which costs are essential costs. And they say, okay, the family needs, they have this much income, and then they have to pay all of these essential costs. And then any money that's left over after those essential costs is kind of considered income that might be used to go towards a university expenses. And so it might be that certain things that are maybe used toward money that's used towards entertainment, or money that's used towards family holidays or something like that. It might be that a university sees that type of income as income that can be used towards paying for university. And so, but if a family's, income, if all the income basically only just covers all of the family's expenses, and there isn't a lot left over after those essential expenses, it might be that the university isn't expecting any contribution from the family, or a very small contribution. So it's typically how it's calculated, but it really just does vary on the university where you're applying. I hope that helps. Somebody asked a follow-up question to the GPA question about how are you able to know where you are in terms of academic requirements? Since if you're looking at US universities, they might have like what the typical GPA is of an admitted student. So that being said, there are some online tools where you can like do a rough calculation of inputting your GCSE results or any A-level predictions to help kind of calculate an estimate of what your GPA is. So you can just do like a Google search for that. And that can kind of give you a sense of what your GPA is. But we would just say that you never use that as an official GPA because it's just from some website, and because all universities calculate it differently. But it is a tool that if you search online for some of those tools, it is a tool that you can use so that you can kind of help understand how you might compare. Another thing that you could always do is actually just reach out to a university and say, I'm trying to get a sense of what how my UK grades compare to your average admitted applicants, and just ask and see what they say. So a question of, if someone isn't from a low-income family but simply doesn't have the funds to study in America, how does financial aid work, and is it available? So, if you are somebody who you don't feel is going to qualify for need-based aid because of your family's circumstances, then you would be looking at merit scholarships at that point. And so you just want to be ensuring that you are applying to institutions that offer merit scholarships that could cover those types of costs. And it might be, finding out from your family if there is any hope of any kind of financial contribution at all. And if there isn't, then it would, you'd be kind of trying to look at institutions that might offer, like the Moorhead Kane scholarship that I mentioned earlier, which is like a fully funded scholarship. So you'd be looking for those. And again, those types of fully funded opportunities are going to be quite competitive. And so you'll just want to make sure that you are able to put together a really strong application if you are looking for that type of funding. Somebody has asked if they're doing A-levels, if they still need to take the SAT or the ACT exams. So this depends on the university. So some universities they don't require the SAT or the ACT exams, just in general. Some universities might say, if you have completed your A-levels, then you don't need the ACT or the SAT exams. But if you haven't yet, if you haven't yet sat your A-level exams and you don't have those kind of finalized grades, then it's unlikely that they'll accept just the predicted grades in place of an SAT or ACT exam. And then some universities will say, even if you're doing A-levels, we still require SAT or ACT exams. And so it really just depends. And so you'll just have to take a look. There is a website that lists the application, the universities that are test optional, which means that they don't require exams. I think it's fairtest.org, if I remember correctly. But you'll just want to make sure, again, that you're looking at the list that's specifically for international applicants, because that list does differ depending on whether you're in the US or whether you're an international applicant. A question about if there's any programs for people who aren't from low incomes to visit the US universities. And so there are a lot of US universities within the US that offer summer programs on campus at their university, especially for international students, to kind of get a taste of what it's like to be at a university. So if you were to just kind of, do some research on what types of, universities, you might even be able to have a think about what types of universities you're thinking about and take a look at those institutions to see if they offer any programs. But there are a lot of universities in the US that offer summer programs over the summer where you can get kind of a taste of what it's like to be at university. And they'll have all sorts of different focuses. It might be that it focuses on a particular academic subject. It might be that it focuses on the process of applying to American universities. There's all sorts of different things that it might focus on. Somebody has asked when they can start applying for the 2023 intake. So if you're looking to apply for to start in autumn of 2023, then typically the applications for that will open about August of 2022. So especially the common application, if you're applying to universities through the common application, that typically opens up in August of the previous year. So August 2022 is when you will start applying for August of 2023 start dates. Somebody has asked about sports scholarships. So if sports scholarships is the primary potential source of funding, does this change the application process? So I would highly recommend going to our website and looking at our page about sports scholarships, because it does change the process a little bit. It's a slightly longer process. The earlier you can get started on it, the better. And we do have a lot more detail about this on our website. It does involve things like putting together a sports CV. It involves starting to reach out to lots of different coaches. And so highly, highly recommend going to our website and finding out more information about that. Somebody is currently at a university and looking to transfer to a US university. And so also definitely recommend going to our website and searching our page for transfer students, because it will give you a lot of information about what that entails. It is a very similar process. Just something to keep in mind is that if you are looking for any kind of financial aid, it can be a bit trickier to find as a transfer student. And so you'll just have to be doing a lot of individual research on each of those individual university websites to see if they offer financial aid, if that's something that you would be looking for to attend, and seeing what the application process is like. A lot of it might still be relevant in terms of writing an essay and all of that information, but your best bet is to kind of look at our website about transfer students and then do the individual research on each of the universities where you're hoping to apply. Somebody has asked if international students are eligible for fee waivers when applying to US universities. And the answer is, it depends, but yes. And so there are a number of universities that do offer fee waivers to international students. And so you can reach out, you can look on individual websites to look at that. You can reach out to universities if you have questions about that. You might even be able to check on the Common application if the university uses it to see if they offer fee waivers through there. And there'll be kind of different requirements depending on the university in order to be eligible for a fee waiver. So just kind of want to check what those requirements are. So just a couple of questions about the different search engines. So I'll just kind of quickly pop onto our website and share some of the links here in the chat for all of you. So I'm just going on our website to the Going to the USA Guide to University Applications. And in terms of choosing a university, just pop into the chat. Choosing a university. So this is the link that has links to all the different search engines. And the example that I had, my example in this session was using the big future college search. And then we have some other questions about, in terms of those resources for external funding bodies and the search engines for that. So I'm just going to put in the chat here, external funding bodies, scholarship search engines. And so that's the link to that on our website as well. So in terms of the questions, somebody has asked about loans for US universities. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, you can't bring your UK student loan with you to the US, unfortunately. So if you were looking at loans, you would have to get them like private loans here in the UK. And we typically recommend this only as a very, very last resort, just because they tend to have very high interest rates and very strict payback terms that might require you to start paying back your loan before you've even completed your studies, before you're earning. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And with that, I think that is most of the questions that have been answered, or that have been asked. One last question, and then we'll wrap it up. If a university doesn't require the SAT or ACT, will taking one put you at an advantage? And so the question, so if a university says that they don't require it, then they really don't require it. So taking one doesn't necessarily put you at an advantage. If they say that they recommend it, then taking one could put you at an advantage. That being said, if you take the exam and you score really, really high on it, and you can see on their website that your high score is in line, you know, let's say that they've made it optional and your high score is in line with what their typical applicant is, then you should submit it. But if it's optional and you've taken it and it isn't that high, then you shouldn't submit it. I hope that helps. All right, well, thank you all for your wonderful questions. And if you do have anything else, don't hesitate to reach out by email at advising@fulbright.org.uk, or to sign up for one of our video advising calls. And you can also sign up for any future events that will be getting listed on the website in the coming months. I'll be sending out the recording in the coming days for you to access. And with that, I hope that you have a lovely evening, and I thank you for attending. Good night.